All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad that you could join us this evening. I think we're going to get right into it. I'm going to let Jesse share a little bit of an introduction, and then Emily is going to share with us about relationships and stress management, and so I'll let her share what she's going to talk about this evening. But I just wanted to welcome you, say we're glad to have you, and we'll start with a word of prayer. So if you'd be willing to join me, let's pray together. Father in heaven, we are so grateful for the bodies that you've given us, for all the things that you have created that make life wonderful and good. We know that that's what your will is for us. And so we pray that as we are thinking about some of these ideas, that we would be able to apply them to our lives and come a little bit closer to that ideal that you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, welcome everyone, and if there's anyone tuning in online, welcome. So welcome to the first of 3 nights of the health seminar we're going to be doing here. We're going to be covering 5 topics: relationships and connectedness, stress management, sleep, diet, and exercise. And these 5 were chosen for 2 reasons. The first is that, well, these obviously all impact our health, but the 2 big reasons we chose these 5 is, first and foremost, we have some control over these areas. So there are plenty of things, as some people know, that do impact our health. There's not a lot we can do about it. So genetics, somebody hitting you in a car that you had no control over, right? But then there's other things, and this falls into a category called lifestyle medicine that we have a pretty good amount of control over. And the second thing is these are all areas that really affect modern health problems. For anyone who was here on Saturday and got to hear Pastor Ryan's sermon about some of the differences between our current health problems and ones maybe 100 years ago, I mean, that was awesome. That's exactly what this is about, by the way. And there are challenges that we have now that we didn't have 50 or 100 years ago. And I'm sure we all see that. We go, oh, all this stuff online and all the stress that comes with it. And I will say personally, I'm super glad to live in the time we live in. I would prefer these problems to some of the ones from a while ago. 100 years ago, super common to just poop yourself to death. So diarrhea was like the leading cause of death 100 years ago. Probably most of us don't know a lot of people who have died from the common cold or influenza. When the flu season rolls around, most of us don't think, oh, this might be my last year, right? We just are like, okay, well, this might be rough for a few weeks and then I'll get through it. But that wasn't the case before. We live in a time when calories in food are very inexpensive and we struggle with our weight. 100 years ago, being overweight was a sign of like affluence and wealth, right? So they had some different struggles. We have some different struggles, and those take some different approaches. And that's why we've chosen these areas of lifestyle medicine, because this is what really can impact the problems that we suffer with on our modern lives. This topic of lifestyle medicine is really personal for me. It's something that it's been a part of my life for a long time. And the first reason for that is when I was in high school, just going into high school, my father was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and it was terrifying to me at the time. The only other person I'd ever met with MS, we went to our church, and he passed away in a couple years. It was very quick, and I was just terrified that was going to happen to my dad. But my dad saw this as just a new mountain to climb and made some huge lifestyle changes, really quite rapid. It's a really brutal disease. But the changes that happened in his health when he made those changes, especially in the first few years, really first decade or two, were profound. All his doctors said it was a miracle. They'd never seen anything like it, and testament to prayer, but a testament to living by sort of biblical lifestyle principles. So the other reason it's really personal, I just told you my dad has MS. Basically every member of my family, I'm from the South, by the way, where we fry everything, and there is a scent of cigarette smoke everywhere you go, and Active lifestyles is not really like a thing. It's like rocking on the front porch in a rocking chair, saying hi to your neighbors. Very friendly, but people don't live very long. All my family members, almost all of them, have pretty significant healthcare problems, relatively short lifespans. So for me, I am pretty aware that my health genetics are not good. My wife, however, over here, she has a family who's all lived a really long time. So I'm just trying to stay healthy. Hopefully I can keep up with her for a long time and be around for my kids. But genetics is a scary thing. If anyone has family history of illnesses, that's a real thing. And that's one of those parts that is out of our control. But we have a lot of control on some of the other things. I heard a really good analogy from a doctor that genetics, if you think of a six-shooter, right? A revolver. Genetics determines how many bullets get loaded in the chamber, but our lifestyle determines if we pull the trigger. So if you're thinking of don't play Russian roulette. Some of us have, unfortunately, more bullets in the chamber. Some of us know or have heard of somebody who lived to 100 while they were drinking and smoking and not doing anything. But that is not the norm. And plenty of people with bad genetics can live long, happy, fulfilled lives. I'm hoping to be one of those. So it's super personal for me, and it's part of what I do for a living, and it's just always been kind of at the forefront of my mind since my dad's diagnosis. Lifestyle medicine is powerful. It makes a big difference, as I just told you about with my dad, and that's what we're going to try and present today or over the next couple days. We're really trying to make this a holistic approach. You're going to hear some topics that I think everyone would go like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I know I should eat healthy. I walked in today and I had a salad in my hand, not because I was meaning anything, and some people were kind of poking at me because, the guy talking about diet has got a salad. I will not be telling everyone to eat only salads, by the way, but it's going to be a holistic approach. We all know, good, fruits and vegetables, those are good. But we may not have known how detrimental to our health things like uncontrolled levels of stress and negative relational experiences, how impactful those are. And I really hope, we're going to talk about those tonight. I hope people listen and don't think that these are foo-foo, hippie, meaningless topics, because they're not. And actually, I really think the Bible gives us a lot of wisdom, and it doesn't always tell us why. Like, the Bible doesn't say listen to your parents, because we studied 150 Jewish teenagers and we found that if you do this, this will happen. It's not how it talks. It just sort of says do this. But we can look at that now, especially with the tremendous amount of scientific research we have, and say, look at that. That makes a lot of sense. And we can look over large swaths of population and find when we follow certain principles, we live longer and we're healthier. I would say also, tonight, tomorrow, and the following night, you may listen to things and go like, I'm great there. I really feel like I've got this dialed. You may hear another one, and it might be just like drinking from a fire hose, and it might be really intimidating, and you might go, I don't even know what to do with this. Where do I start? I would encourage you not to get too bogged down with all this. You're coming to, if you're coming to all 5 nights, you're going to be listening to 3 nights, 5 topics. It's more than you bargained for. It's going to be a lot of information. Please don't go home and try and make a tremendous amount of changes in your life tomorrow. That is not realistic. It's not sustainable. When you hear, you're going to hear something over the next couple nights, and you're going to go, I could do that. That's what you should start with. Pick the low-hanging fruit, something that would already fit with your lifestyle, would already fit with what you're doing, but would make a small change, and start there. And then when you get some success and you start to be like, I did this thing and I actually feel better and I can tell there's a difference, you're going to be way more motivated to add the next thing on and the next thing on. And we are talking about lifestyle medicine. This is a lifestyle. This isn't a pill. This isn't a single thing that you do. It's a journey. It takes time. I can tell you all 3, myself, Shelly, and Emily, we were just talking about it. We were like, man, I hope no one thinks we've got it all together, because we are all on our own health journey. Where I was in my health 2 to 3 years ago was quite a bit different from where I'm at right now. I definitely feel better, for sure. I am not where I'd like to be. So we're certainly not standing up here telling you that we know everything, that you should follow us and how we live our life, that you should walk in with a salad because I did. That's not what we're telling you. But we are telling you that you can make small differences, and you really can make a big impact on your life as those add up over time. But don't start with everything. Start with something easy. Start with something small and go from there. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Emily here in just a minute, but I wanted to give you 2 quick studies that I think show how powerful some of these relational and stress things are. So the first one's not on humans. This was a study done on rabbits, but I think they're cute and fuzzy, so I'm going to talk about it. So there was a group of scientists. They were trying to figure out, surprise, what diet led to more buildup in our blood vessels. So they fed all these rabbits a whole bunch of different diets, and rabbits are all in these cages. They kind of go up like this. You have rows and columns. And they finished the study, and nothing made sense. The data was all over the place. The diets that they thought would be really beneficial weren't really that beneficial, weren't as beneficial as they thought. The ones that were more harmful didn't seem to be as much. And basically, you had good and bad people in good and bad outcomes in every diet. And they were just super confused. It didn't make sense. They had done other rabbit studies, and they knew that they expected certain things to happen in the outcome. So one of the scientists one day was just pondering this while standing looking at the rabbits. And he saw not one of the scientists, but just one of the lab workers come by, and she was feeding the rabbits. And he noticed that she was kind of a shorter lady, as the story goes. And the rabbits that were about at her height, she would open the door, she would feed them, and then she would give them a little pet, and she would pull them out and hold them and scratch their ears, put them back in, and then go to the next cage. And the ones that were really low or that were really high, she would just basically swap the food, and then go on. And he went, that's interesting. That didn't make any sense. And this study isn't new. This was done, I want to say it was the 80s or 90s. It was quite a while ago. So he went, I wonder if that could have anything to do with it. So they designed the study differently the next time. And this time, they gave the lab technician a better job, and they said, your job is to play with certain bunnies, and we really want you to spend a little extra time with them. So they fed them all the same diet, but had the nice lady play with a certain group of rabbits, and then not play at all with the other rabbits. No affection, no love, no caring, just give them food. And then when the study was done, they did what they do with all animal studies, unfortunately, and they killed the fluffy little rabbits, and they cut them open, and they looked at their arteries, and they found that there was significantly more plaque buildup in the rabbits that had the same diet, but did not have affection and love and scratched behind the ears. And I think it was to the tune of 60 or 70% more. Don't quote me on that, but it was a lot. It was way more than 50%. So it makes a big difference. And that leads me to the next one, which is a study on metastatic breast cancer. So there's a couple different types of breast cancer. Metastatic is none of them you want. It's not, no one wants any type of cancer, but metastatic is definitely the less preferable one. Pretty low 5-year survival rate. And they looked at a group of women who had had metastatic breast cancer. They were all given the same medical treatment, but one group of women was put into a group of basically just a social support group. They would meet multiple times a week for like an hour or 90 minutes. I mean, they weren't just like sending a text back and forth. They were getting together, they were hugging, they were crying, they were talking through everything that was going on. And they followed both groups of women, and the group of women that had social support lived twice as long with the same medical treatment. So when we talk about, or when Emily talks about some of these relational things and these stress management things, these are not little things. These are big, impactful treatment modalities that people used to get all the time, but our current modern life just isn't conducive to getting. And I hope as we listen to her, we'll get some practical tips and things we can put into place. But more than that, I hope we take from this is the sort of the understanding that none of the areas we're going to talk about are areas where our modern life is conducive to. If it was, we'd all be walking around with our arms around our best friend from high school, and we'd be trim and fit, and we'd all be super strong, and we would be getting 9 hours of sleep every night. The reason we don't all do that is because it's not easy. It takes a lot of effort to get to those things, but those things are the way that I believe we were meant to live, and one day, God willing, we're going to live again. But for right now, we're stuck on a sinful world, and I hope that you'll get something from what Emily's going to say and what we're going to say the next few nights. And hopefully it can help our health and maybe relieve a little suffering while we're here.
All right, good evening. I'm so glad you guys are here. So hopefully each of you got a folder as you came in, because there's going to be, like he said, a fire hose of information coming at you. So it's 2 talks tonight, 2 talks tomorrow night, and then 1 and a wrap-up on Saturday night. So each night you're going to get handouts. You can add to this folder. You can leave them at home. You can follow up, take notes, do the worksheets at home. But we want to encourage you to use the information and and I did an outline of mine because it's 2 talks tonight. I don't want you to get bogged down. So I'm hoping you can kind of, if you're getting antsy, which feel free, stand up, go to the bathroom, anything you need to do while I'm talking, while we're discussing together, feel free to do that at any point. But also you can kind of follow the outline to see about where I am. So that can kind of help too with some of that angst or, but yeah, I'm so glad you guys are here. We have lots to talk about. So my name is Emily King. I'm a professional mental health counselor. I have an office in Bozeman. I'm part-time counselor, part-time stay-at-home mom right now to 4 kids. And I'm from Tennessee as well. So yeah, but we moved here a few years ago. My husband grew up here, and so we are here now. I'm trying to think if there was anything else if I wanted to say in the beginning. I don't think so. Maybe it'll come to me later. But we're just so glad you guys are here tonight. Hopefully you got a pen to take notes. And these topics are things that I myself am very passionate about. But as Jesse said, I don't have it all together, and I'm still working on these areas just as much as you are. So, relationships. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. How many of us have wonderful relationships? But that is what we are talking about. Okay, so in 2019, there was a study of 10,000 adults in the U.S., and 10,000 is a pretty big number for a research study. And they found that 3 out of 5 adults in the U.S. reported feeling lonely, right? That's a big number, and that was pre-COVID, so I'm sure the numbers have not gone down since then. So this idea of loneliness, feeling alone, feeling disconnected, I think it's a myth to think that just because I'm surrounded by people that I'm not feeling lonely, right? We can be very lonely and yet be around people all the time. Instead, it's this idea of, I don't have meaningful close relationships or a sense of belonging. It's a difference between your desired level of connection and your actual level of connection. So in other words, quality over quantity. And so I think that's really important to think about is how good of quality are those close relationships that you do have. And that's what we're going to do a deep dive into tonight, is those close relationships. So ask yourself, because I'm not going to ask you guys to answer, but how connected are you? And really try to put a number on that as we begin the talk. And does your desired level of connectedness meet your actual level of connectedness in how you feel, what you experience on a day-to-day basis? So we know, like Jesse said, the effects of loneliness on health are huge, right? Social isolation and loneliness affect us mentally, physically, in a host of different ways. So physically, it actually increases our risk for heart disease and stroke for about 30%. And they say it's as lethal as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, which is pretty crazy, right? Mentally, obviously, you can jump to that a little easier, causes depression, anxiety. And as a counselor, I would say also, and also the research shows, like addiction, right? When we are not connected to others, we are going to be more prone to fall into addiction out of that loneliness. It's a way of escape, a way of to get that spike in dopamine when we're feeling low. And so that's something else, just on a side note. If you're struggling with addiction, in your mind, go to, am I lonely? What are my relationships like? Sometimes that has to be addressed in order to deal with the addiction. Also, earlier death, in fact, from loneliness. And in fact, the book Love and Survival talks about that there's a bigger risk for disease and death related to loneliness than poor diet, lack of exercise, or smoking. So yeah, definitely huge. Also, what contributes to that, our society today, as Jesse mentioned, is not conducive to relationships, right? We're busy. And all the technology, we are disconnected in our society. In the United States, it's not collectivistic, it's individualistic. We're in our homes. We get upset if someone knocks on our door. We're typically, that's not part of our culture. There's not as much connecting. We're exhausted. Mental health issues also hurt relationships as well. So as Christians, we know biblically that we are created for connection. So there's a book I highly recommend. It's called The Naked Soul by Tim Gardner. And he asserts that God created Adam in his image, right? But then Adam was lonely, right? So then God created a helper for him. He created Eve. So if you put that together, essentially it's saying, because Adam was walking with God, right, in the garden, all these things, that God created us with a relational need that he chose himself to not fulfill all of it, right? And that just is mind-blowing to me. Yes, the Lord comes first. Our intimacy with the Lord should always be first, but he created us with a need for those close relationships. Think of the Trinity and how they exist. Think of how relational God is. We as human beings, created in God's image, we are relational beings. And we long for that intimacy with other people. So I want you now, we're going to go to the next step in your thinking of who are you closest to in your life? Who do you confide in? Who do you ask for support from? Who do you spend the most time with? And hopefully this is not just one person. I always tell my clients this should be 2 to 3 people, but I want you to be honest tonight with yourself. And if it's nobody, if there's just one, just be very honest about that. And what is the health of those relationships? And when we're talking about relationships, do I just mean romantic relationships? Is that all we're talking about? No. We have got to get outside of that in our thinking that the only relationship that matters is between me and my partner. That's just not the case, right? So close relationship can be a partner, a romantic partner, or it could be a parent, a child, a friend, a sibling. It can be, right, whoever you want it to be. So I just want to clarify that. So when clients come into my office and I'm looking at what is your level of support, and you have this in your handout, so you can take that out now if you would like. I will show them, I will draw these concentric circles. And so at the very center of the circle, obviously, is you, right? The next circle out is your inner circle of support. And this is what I'm talking about. This should be 2 to 3 people. And that's what we're going to spend the most of tonight talking about, is that inner circle. The next level out is the middle circle, and so we'll talk about, basically these are circles of trust, right? So the inner circle is the people that you trust explicitly. They're not going to tell your secrets to. They are trustworthy. They're also someone that you really connect with. We're going to really break that down a lot. So thinking about who am I closest to, who do I trust the most, who is in that inner circle? And you might find after tonight that you need to make some changes there, okay? And so that's what we're discussing. So in the inner circle, those people should be, are they a healthy person? Are they a healthy person? So right now I want to take a minute or two for you to take the sheet out, get your pen out, and no one's going to see this but you. I want you to write in that inner circle of trust, the first one there, it says inner circle, the names of the people in your inner circle. Who do you confide in? Who do you spend the most time with? We'll take a few seconds to write names there. And maybe it's no one, and there's nothing to be ashamed about. Maybe it's one person. It's whoever, and maybe the person isn't saved. It doesn't matter right now. Just write who it actually is, okay? Is it on? Is it better? Okay. Okay? And if you've done your inner circle, now, so this is your closest friends. Now go to the next circle, the middle circle. Now I want you to write the names of, I would classify this as your friends. And when I say friend, it could be a family member, but basically the people who you talk to some, like about personal things, but you're not going to divulge your life secrets, right? So who is in that middle circle? And usually there's like, I don't know, 5 people. It's whatever number you want. But who are those friends? They're not your best friends, but they're friends, and you can count on them. Okay, and then in your outer circle, these are people, your more acquaintances, so people that, you still may hang out with on occasion. You may, talk to about some things, but it's not personal, right? This might be extended family, this could be acquaintances, but what are those names, right? And I just want to say one more time, you could have your husband in the outer circle. You could have your grandparent in the inner circle. Like, there's no obligation here. It is who you determine it to be, okay? And then what I want you to do is, we're talking tonight, be thinking of those names in that inner circle and pray about in your mind tonight, is there any change I need to make here? And we're going to talk about that. So when we're talking about our inner circle and we talk about unsafe people, I do have to mention abuse, because obviously we're going to react more strongly to that than just unhealthy or unsafe. So there's 3 main types of abuse: emotional, physical, sexual, and obviously physical and sexual are more obvious. And it's harder sometimes to identify emotional abuse. But emotional abuse is you get into an argument with this person, a fight. There's name calling or cursing. There's intimidation used when you fight with them. Maybe they don't actually physically hurt you, but they're throwing things, they're punching walls, they're destroying property. They may threaten to hurt you, they may hurt themselves, or they may threaten to leave the relationship. And all of those, of course, are a form of manipulation and control. To keep themselves in control of the relationship is why they do that. So loss of manipulation and control. Gaslighting is a term basically we use to describe turning things around to make you question yourself. And so that applies to, wait, what did I mean? What were my intentions when I said that? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this is all my fault. It turns it around to always be on you. You did something wrong, or you're crazy. You're mentally crazy to be saying this. So they're really good at turning it around, okay? And that's because they don't want to take responsibility for their own behaviors. They are always the victim, okay? So this is not just, once again, a romantic partner. This could be your own mother, your own father, your brother, your sister. This can be anyone, right? And so if you're in a relationship with someone that's emotionally abusive, I would encourage you, call the abuse hotline. The number's up there. Text START to 88788, but also get professional help for that, because that's very serious to deal with. So in our inner circle, we want to pray to God about, Lord, I know that you want me to be close to people. I know you created within me that need. Who do you want me to be close to? Who is a good influence for me? And are the people that I'm currently spending my time with, sharing my heart with, are they healthy, godly people that are good for me? And have an honest conversation with God about that, and He will reveal that to you. And if you determine that they're not healthy, we're going to talk about boundaries, right? There are ways to set boundaries within those relationships. And I want to empower you with that tonight. You are not just stuck in this unhealthy situation, right? You can do something about it. And then sometimes if the boundaries aren't working, there's times when a friendship or partner, you may need to leave. period, leave for a time. I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's between you and God, your pastor. But boundaries are the first go-to in counseling when we're dealing with this. So many times when I'm telling people to set boundaries in a relationship, they have lots of concerns or objections about that. And so sometimes it's like, well, they're going to be really mad at me, or I'm going to really miss them, which is legitimate. You will. We have a lot of history, and you know what? It's really hard to make big changes, and this is the pattern I'm used to. So it's easier to be in this relationship because it's just what I've always known, right? And so that change is very hard for people, and that's legitimate concerns. But what I say to people when they're saying these things is I say, what are your top priorities? What does the Lord put you in charge of? What is your number one responsibility in life? And that's you, right? It's your health. It's your relationship with the Lord. It's your peace of mind. You're not responsible for another person. I'm not talking about a little child, obviously, but I'm talking adult to adult. You're not responsible for their health, their happiness. You're responsible for your own. And I believe that the Lord is going to ask us, like the good steward, what did we do with what he gave us? And did we take care of our minds, right? And so I think there's a lot to be said for prioritizing your relationship with the Lord, your mental health, for what you're responsible for. And I think this is biblical. I believe that we are called to prioritize our mental health. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. When you're in a situation where you're being talked down to or disrespected, how at peace are you? Are you at peace? No, right? There's no peace with that, right? If you're constantly being berated, yelled at, so guarding our heart and how we're treated affects everything. Philippians 4:8, when it talks about whatever is true, noble, right, pure, think about such things. Our thinking is impacted by who we spend time with, isn't it? And what are they influencing us to think about? We're called to choose friends wisely. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. Multiple times in Scripture, it tells us, choose your friends, right? Because you're influenced. Bad company corrupts good character. We are influenced by who we are around. And so I think the Lord has called us to be very intentional about these relationships. Does that make sense? So we talked about who should be in your inner circle, healthy, safe people, but also people with similar values and goals. Because how can I, when it talks about being unyoked, I don't think that's just romantic. It's also those close relationships, unequally yoked, of having similar values and goals, right? I think that's vitally important for our well-being. And the person should also be someone you admire and you want to be like. Not someone that, sometimes we can be close to someone, but if we have an honest conversation with ourselves, we're like, I don't know if I really want to be like them or not, So I think that's important as well. So then the question is, okay, maybe now I've realized that the people in my inner circle, there's some issues there, right? So what do I do? Okay, the two biggest things that you can do are related to your time and what you talk about, okay? So you can, without telling this person, because I remember this when I started on this journey, it was kind of like, well, that's really awkward and hurtful if I just tell someone, you're not going to be in my inner circle anymore. You don't have to do that. You can limit time with that person, right? Actions speak louder than words. Okay, I'll go do this with you, but no longer am I going to talk to you every night, or I'm going to, you can also decide what you talk to them about. Now, this is game-changing because I think there's this sense of people feel like they owe someone information. You don't owe anyone any information, right? So just because someone is saying asking you the questions, you don't have to go on and, oh yeah, what I did today was blah, 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 blah. This happened, you can say, I'm fine. It went pretty well. You can limit that information. And many times for my clients, this is a game changer, because this person has been able to control them their whole life through the information that they are getting. They use it to turn it around and manipulate and control them. And so you can limit that information to what you determine is healthy, that they can't use against you. So those are kind of the two things that we start out with when we want to make changes in those relationships. So when we talk about changing what you talk about with the person, this is in your next handout. So there's 5 levels of communication. And I think this is really important to get familiar with. So level 1 is the shallow conversation. How's the weather? How's your job? How are the kids, right? This is very surface, okay? Then facts, sports, president, weather, just this is what happened, this is the fact, the news. Opinions. Now we're getting a little deeper, right? This is my thoughts about what happened in the news. This is my thought about what's going on of the current situation. Level 4, emotional. This is how I feel about it, right? I'm really upset by it. It really bothers me. And then level 5 is that vulnerability of, you really hurt my feelings, or that makes me feel really insecure when that person does that, right? It's that deep vulnerability, your fears, your dreams, your hopes, your insecurities. So if you decide, I want to move the person in my close circle, I want to move them out a little bit. Okay, so maybe no longer do you talk to them at that level 5 conversation. Maybe no longer do you share with them those vulnerabilities, because they'll just use it and turn it against you to manipulate and control, right? So instead, I'm going to limit it to, and you have control over conversations. Many times, unhealthy people, you think they have all the control, but they don't. And so you have to then in the conversation say, you know what? I don't have to tell them that. I'm just going to be very brief here. And that is your prerogative. And so I think this is really important to realize, to empower you. You can limit the information that you share. So going into boundaries. So when we have someone in our life who we determine is not very healthy, and they're continually hurting us, or they're unsafe, whatever it might be, how can we set boundaries with them? So you have a informational handout about boundaries, and then you also have a worksheet about boundaries, which I'll send you home with. So with boundaries, it's this idea, and I highly recommend the book called Boundaries by Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend. It is life-changing. It is wonderful. They are both professional ministers as well as psychologists, so they mix the best of both. They have scripture all throughout the book. Anyway, but this idea of boundaries is where you end and where I begin. It's this idea of, this is me, this is what I'm about, and I'm not going to change that, right? This is who I am. So in a good way, maybe I said that in a bad way, but essentially it's protecting your personal rights, so knowing when those rights are violated, and then that's a sign to you, I need to set a boundary here. They're healthy for you and for the other person. Even though the other person may not like it, it's actually better for them, otherwise you're actually enabling bad dysfunctional behaviors. So it's actually, you have to tell yourself it's healthy for both. Boundaries can be verbalized, but they don't have to be, right? For instance, if you say, if you yell at me, I'm going to leave the room. You can say that, but the most important thing is what? To just leave the room. I think that speaks for itself. Like, okay, you're yelling, I'm out, right? Or you're cursing, or you're whatever, I'm out. So actions are super important with boundaries. Boundaries should also be very clear and consistent, and they must have the follow-through. Otherwise, it's honestly pointless. You have to follow through with it. So there's, Yeah, it's good to talk to a counselor about this or a good friend, knowing where you need to set a boundary and how to do that. So part of that is getting really familiar with what are the rights that God gave me as a person. You have a right to an opinion. You have a right to feel safe. I have had a client who, she would ask me, well, my husband, he doesn't hit me, but he yells and he's cursing. Sometimes he throws things. I just feel like, I don't know, do I have a right to leave or to tell him to stop? What do you all think? It's your home. Yes, you have a right to feel safe in your home. And so I think a lot of times we forget that. You have that right. And if you decide to walk to the other room or walk out, you've done nothing wrong in doing that, right? You have a right to your own personal space and time alone. Sometimes very controlling people, they get very insecure when you're with friends or even when you're spending time by yourself. You have the right to be treated with dignity and respect, a right to spend time with your friends. You don't have to. So if you have a phone conversation going on, does your partner in this situation have a right to listen in on every phone conversation? I mean, first of all, they should trust you, but second of all, no, you have a right to privacy, right? And I also encourage you all, the book Boundaries in Marriage was also written by Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend. And I think sometimes we think in a marriage, all boundaries are just out the door. And that's not true. In a healthy marriage, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, there actually are healthy boundaries in place. You can talk on the phone by yourself. You can have your own friends. You can have your own hobbies. And then I have a right to make my own decisions, right? So these are some of them. So when these are being violated, then you know, okay, I need to set a boundary here. I believe it's biblical to have healthy boundaries. I believe Jesus had boundaries. Number one, he took time away from people to think and to pray. The people wanted him there all the time. And he said, no, I need to go talk to my Father. That was a boundary that he set. He stood up to the Pharisees many times. He said, this behavior you have is inappropriate. The things that you were doing, the things that you were saying, you hypocrites, he stood up to them. I think it's even a boundary how he didn't respond to Pilate's questions. That was a boundary he set, in my mind, to not engage in the back and forth arguing, right? He doesn't have anything to prove, right? He is who he says he is. Also, he had a boundary with his parents. They got upset when he was 12 and he went off and was in the temple. He didn't, you're right. He said, I have to be about my Father's business. He set a boundary there. And he didn't heal every single person. He responded to faith. That's who he healed. He responded to faith and who the Lord, his Father, told him to. So Jesus had boundaries. Boundaries are healthy if they're done in a kind, healthy, good way. So types of boundaries, physical boundaries, just your bubble. So people that come too close to talk to you, people that are putting their arm around you without permission, people who, don't ask for permission for things. Actually, there's even physical boundaries in marriage. Once again, they don't just have a right to everything, anytime, anywhere. There's still boundaries in place there. Emotional boundaries. So this is, one, how much you choose to share with someone, but it's also, and I see this happen a lot with my clients, getting so wrapped up in someone else's problems that there's no emotional separation there, right? So, and once again, I'm not talking about little children, but I'm talking about adult to adult, right? Even if it is my child and they are now grown, or even if it's my sister or my best friend, I'm not saying if someone dies, but I'm saying, it's their life at the end of the day, right? It is your life at the end of the day. And you can still, and this is mind-boggling, but you can still show empathy and have good boundaries. And a lot of people confuse those two. Well, if I have empathy, then I'm going to be just depressed all day and crying in bed, and I can't function because I'm just thinking about how awful it is for them. You can have empathy and still function, still have boundaries, reminding yourself, honestly, at the end of the day, it's still their life, right? And I, as a counselor, I have to do that all the time, or else I couldn't be a counselor. But material possessions, so your money, your possessions. So this would be somebody constantly asking you for money all the time. You can say no. And in fact, sometimes it's healthier for them if you say, I'm not going to just lend you money every single time you ask. Or your car, I'm not just going to let you borrow my car every single time you ask. Like putting those boundaries in place, you're not enabling them. Intellectual boundaries, how you decide to express your thoughts and feelings and when you decide to do that. Sometimes this might come up in politics. Maybe you're expressing an opinion to someone and they very quickly disrespect you in that. Well, then you don't have to share your opinion with them anymore, right? Or vice versa. They're telling you their opinion politically or whatever on a strong topic, and you feel like, well, man, I'm just so intimidated right now. I feel like I can't disagree with them. It's up to you, but you can disagree, and hopefully they still respect that. In time, you can have a boundary with your time. And this is the time that I'm going to be working or studying or that I spend with my spouse or my friend, and I'm not going to allow it to be interrupted, right? Sometimes people get very controlling with your time and they say, no, I want you to spend all your time with me, or I'm upset when you go do that with your friend. You can decide how you spend your time. So some examples of setting boundaries. Well, first of all, before I go on, are there any questions so far with what I've talked about with boundaries? Okay, so as we go on, just let me know if you're having any questions about, like, would this be a boundary, or is this, or how would I make a boundary in this situation? Because I think we really need to make this applicable. So an example, you may not continue to yell at me, or I will leave the room. I won't be giving you any more money. Please do not take my car again without asking. I cannot spend time with you now, but I can later on today. Let me think about this before I say yes or no. And this can apply to church offices, right? Can you do this church position? Is it bad to just say, can I have a couple days to think and pray about it? Is that okay? Or do you have to feel like, I have to make a decision now? And if someone's trying to pressure you, honestly, they're not being respectful of, I need a minute to process this. Or another one, because you continue to try to control me, I'm going to limit what I tell you. Or you don't even have to say it, you just do it, right? So is that kind of making sense? Like how we're setting boundaries, whether verbalized or not? Okay. So yeah, before we go to the next step of boundaries, any questions with any of those examples or anything? Okay. And like I said, I just want to acknowledge, it's not easy to set boundaries. It's very difficult. And many times, well, let me ask, is the person going to be happy that you're setting a boundary with them? No. They're going to get angry, actually. But almost every single time in my own life, or my clients, or my friends, like when we set boundaries, almost every single time, that person will respect you more for setting them. And a lot of the times they will circle back around and they'll be close to you again, but this time it'll be healthy instead of them just taking advantage of you all the time. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm like ruining this relationship. You're actually improving it, and if they decide to leave for a time or whatever, that's on them, right? You're just bringing up the level of where the relationship needs to be, and it's healthy, and you're no longer enabling them. So so I would say with boundaries, there's some practice ones here that you can take home and work on. How would you set a boundary in those situations? And that can be really helpful. So in a healthy relationship, when we talk about boundaries, if you were to see these two circles, and one circle is me and one circle is you, and they overlap, the part that overlaps is us. So you can actually write that in there if you want, or I guess you can just make your own circles on your notes because I know you don't have that. But so make two circles, overlap them like about halfway, write me, you, and the part that overlaps, us. So once again, in a healthy relationship, whether friendship, romantic, boundaries are healthy. And we're going to talk about what these circles mean in just a second. In an unhealthy relationship or a codependent relationship, the circles of me and you completely overlap. So there's no me, there's no you, it is just us. That's all there is. And in the other kind of unhealthy relationship, there's either just a tiny bit of overlap or they're actually separate circles. So me, you, and very little us, or maybe none at all. So you can draw those circles and show those three distinctions because this is also really life-changing. So thinking of the circles where a healthy relationship, part of it overlaps, part does not. So what that looks like, what that implies, is that there is still our own separate identities, and there's a part that is intimate and vulnerable and close, right? It's not either or, it's both. It's also a sense of, I want you, I want to be with you, but I don't need you. Like, I can breathe, I can function without you. That's actually healthy, right? Yeah, we'll talk about that more in a minute. Equal give and take. There is vulnerability, there is sharing, there is time together and also time apart. We don't have to spend every waking moment together. You still have your own hobbies. Some hobbies we do together, others, I don't really like that. That's fine. You go do it. It's fine. And your own friends. You have some mutual friends. You have some friends separate. And honestly, they don't have to love every single friend of yours, right? But, it's if it's healthy and you love that person, obviously same gender, I'm not talking about opposite gender, but in romantic relationships. But also, just healthy boundaries in place, whether it has to do with your time, your friends, your decisions. And that's another thing. In a healthy relationship, you're not making every single decision together. You're making big decisions together, but like the day-to-day, you can make decisions on your own, right? And not feel controlled by the other person. So when we talk about vulnerability in a healthy relationship, what is vulnerability? Because I think sometimes people struggle in this area, so it's important to talk about. Sharing your thoughts and your feelings. So why you're upset, and that isn't important to tell someone you're close to when they've hurt your feelings. Why do you think? Yeah. Yeah, right. So they don't continue to do it. Yeah. Oh, that's really good. That is so true, because we build up resentment and then we build up walls. Sometimes I don't even know why, right? And I think this is more important this specifically, I would say in a romantic relationship, this is even more important. In friendship, I think it is a little different level of I don't think you're going to tell your friend every single time they look at you the wrong way. I mean, I don't know, maybe you do. But you're going to tell them significant patterns of you've done this over and over and over to me. I'm tired of it. I need to tell you this. Versus your spouse, because you're with them all, I do think there's more sharing of hurt feelings. I need to tell you hurt my feelings yesterday. I need, because you got to live with the person, right? I mean, that's important. Offering forgiveness is a big part of vulnerability because our pride wants to hold on to that hurt. And so being able to say, okay, I forgive you, it's hard, but shows a lot of vulnerability. And saying I love you often is also a big part of vulnerability as well. So any questions before I go to the next slide about vulnerability? And I will say, going back to safe people, should we be vulnerable with people who are unsafe? No, right? So vulnerability is reserved for my safe person, right? Or more than one person, people. And that is a special part of me, and I don't have to go around, and actually I would say it's more healthy to reserve vulnerability for those you're close to. I think it's unhealthy and shows a lack of boundaries when we're sharing, like, you hurt my feelings to every church member, or I wanted to tell you about my deepest, darkest secrets to everyone you meet, right? There is a level of, like, vulnerability should be with those we're closest to. Okay, so going back to those circles, now we're on the 2 circles where there's complete overlap of just us. This is a codependent relationship. Now, does this just apply to romantic relationships? No. We can have codependent relationships with our mom, our dad, our brother, our sister, our friend. This is a sense of need. I feel like I need this person in my life. I feel like I can't function without them. And there's no judgment here, because I think we've all had codependent relationships at one point. Whether romantic or with another, I think we've all had some sort of codependent relationship. There's a sense of loss of yourself, of your own identity. I don't know who I am anymore. I'm wrapped up in who they are. You spend all your time together. You have the same hobbies, all the same friends. Usually in a codependent relationship, there's someone who is controlling and someone who is being controlled. And they're both getting a benefit from that, which is very interesting but unhealthy. One partner is enabling, and a lot of times you'll see the enabler with the other has an addictive personality, and they're enabling some sort of addiction in that codependence. One partner gives a lot, the other takes a lot. These are some signs of a codependent relationship, whether romantic or friendship. Any questions on codependency? Because this is a big topic for people too. And like I said, a lot of times it could, I see codependency a lot, not in just romantic, but parent-child. I see a lot of that, like the child with the parent with the child, especially, I'm talking more adults, so why do we have codependent relationships? Is because of some sort of unmet need from childhood that we did not get, and this person gives it to us. So an example might be, if I had you all raise your hand, I just will. How many of you had an unmet need from childhood? Honestly, it would be all of us, right? All of us. Because there's no perfect parent. So it could be that you had a lack of nurture. Maybe your parents just weren't very like, oh, honey, I'm sorry, come here. They were just more cold type people. Maybe it's a lack of affection, maybe a lack of structure in the home. It was just super chaotic. There was no bedtime. Maybe it's quality time, affirmation, this sense of they never told me, like, you're doing a good job, I'm proud of you, or a sense of acceptance. Some parents, it's kind of like this conditional love. Like, I'll love you if you're a good boy. I'll love you if you're a good girl, but as soon as you're not, I withdraw my love and affection, I'm cold to you, right? And so that can lead us to want to be with someone who has this kind of unconditional love or acceptance of us. So we get one of these in the relationship, and therefore we put up with a lot of dysfunction from that person because we're getting a need met. So I think this is vital to, if you're in a codependent relationship, you need to ask yourself, what need am I getting met? Because I need to break this cycle. And in order to get the need met, you identify the need, and then you ask the Lord, I really feel there's a deficit in this area of my heart that I did not get. I need to start getting this in my relationship with you. And then also in turn, giving it to yourself, which means affirming thoughts, it means being kind to yourself, lots of different things. And you start providing that. And that way you're not going from one codependent to another codependent relationship to another. You break that cycle. Does that make sense? So the other type of circles that we talked about where they're completely separate or just a little bit overlapping is an avoidant relationship. So this is the exact opposite of codependency. They're very disconnected from each other, more like roommates. There's no vulnerability. There's limited sharing in the relationship. You spend a lot of time apart, completely independent of your decision making, and you don't compromise or change at all for the other person. And typically in these relationships, there's a high amount of arguing and conflict because we're just not, none of us are humbling ourselves here. So this is also not healthy. And so in this relationship, we'd want to learn how to be more vulnerable with one another. So in saying with those 3 different types of relationships, I think it's also important to mention attachment styles very briefly, because that also plays a part in the types of relationships that you typically find yourself in. So attachment style, there's secure attachment and insecure attachment. And many times this is related to the home we grew up in. We have secure attachment typically if our parents were really good about being attentive and responsive to our needs as children, right? Being present, always there, consistent. Insecure is maybe we didn't. Now I will say, because I just recently went to a conference about this, that you can have wonderful parents and be securely attached as a child, and then as you get older, you maybe date someone or marry someone who cheats on you, and guess what? All of a sudden, your attachment style flips, and now you're insecurely attached. And really all that means is you don't trust the other person, you don't trust the relationship, you're always second guessing. So there's 3 types of insecure attachment. So anxious insecure would be, and you might see this in yourself or someone else, when the other person is upset at you, you're very quickly, I'm so sorry for what I did. Whatever it takes, I'll do anything. I just got to be close to you. I got to be close to you. It's this like fear of abandonment that they're going to leave. So it creates this dysfunction. Also avoidant, which is the idea of like, I just distrust you. I can't be close to you. So this would be an emotionally unavailable person. They don't trust relationships. And disorganized is kind of a combination of back and forth of the 2. And like I said, you can change. So I want to encourage you, if you're more insecurely attached in your relationships, you can make changes to become securely attached. And if you don't know what you are, there's quizzes online you can look at, or just look at the signs of it to discover that and be able to break that pattern. So we just have a couple points left, and then we're going to be done with this talk. So with healthy communication, super important in a healthy relationship to have good communication. So when we're in a relationship, just a couple key points of good communication. Are we blaming people? Are we, it's always your fault, you're the problem? No, we are taking ownership of our feeling. So it's these I feel statements. I feel hurt, sad, frustrated when you do this, right? So we're taking ownership of that. Active listening is trying more to understand the person rather than just thinking about how you're going to respond. So checking in for clarity, this is what I'm hearing. Did I hear you right? What do you really mean by this? I think in our human nature, it's so easy when someone says something to jump to the conclusion, you said that because you are trying to be mean, and instead of just taking a minute and trying to understand what they're really saying, right? And so that's very important. And even paraphrasing back to them sometimes, like repeating back. So here's what I heard you say, and you can literally say it word for word. Is that really what you're saying? Clarify before you just jump back in with what you want to say. So these are some points on healthy communication. Healthy. You're able to still be kind. Healthy. You're able to still be kind, right? We're not yelling, swearing, name-calling. You're able to take a time out if you need to cool down your emotions. And I also, another question about conflict. Do you have to resolve all your conflicts in a relationship for it to be healthy? Do you have to have a perfect solution with a bow tied around it? No. In fact, they even say something like 90%, I don't think it's that high, it's like 80 or 90% of conflicts don't get perfectly resolved, right, in a romantic relationship anyway. Now, that being said, you may resolve it in a month. You may resolve it in a year. Like, it's not like it's never going to get resolved. That's not what I'm saying. But it doesn't in that moment typically get resolved, right? So it's more about how you have the conflict. So let me ask you, how hard is it to disagree with someone and be holding their hand while you're disagreeing? Like, how hard is that? That's really challenging. In fact, I get irritated when my spouse reaches for my hand and I'm upset. I'm like, ugh, just go away. I'm mad at you. I don't want to touch your hand, So I think healthy, honestly, if it's a healthy relationship, most of the time it's not intentional to manipulate or to be mean. It's just because they didn't know, right? So try to give the benefit of the doubt that they still love me. It was not intentional, and, offer forgiveness. I think that's super important in any conflict. All right, so summary of what we've said tonight with relationships. Having healthy, close relationships will boost your health and happiness in huge ways. Everyone needs 2 to 3 healthy people in their inner circle. Continually evaluate that circle. Follow principles of healthy relationships. Learn to be vulnerable with safe people. Set boundaries as you need to with unsafe people. And so the questions, once again, that I'm going to leave you with: how connected are you? What are your closest relationships? What are the health of those relationships? Okay, so that's it for healthy relationships. So I want to take a couple minutes for any questions. And then we're going to have a short break before we go to the next topic. Yeah.
So when we were talking about the attachment style,
Yeah.
is that global, like this is your style, do you attach with everyone, or is that specific to certain relationships?
No, it can be different in different relationships. I will say there's usually a pattern, though, but no, it can definitely be different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Other questions? We talked about a lot. Any questions on boundaries? Any questions on conflict, communication, vulnerability? Boundaries, in general, Boundaries by Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend, but then also Boundaries in Marriage. But Boundaries itself is a huge book that covers boundaries in every type of relationship. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you want to privately come ask me a question, maybe you don't want everyone to hear, that's fine too. We're going to take like a 5-minute break, go get water, go to the bathroom. Bathrooms are either downstairs or right there. And then we're going to start right back pretty quick with stress management, because that's huge for our health as well. So yeah, take a quick break, stretch, get water, bathroom. And if you have a question,
Hey everyone. All right, we're going to get going here. Emily's got her second topic. But before we do that, this is a seminar on health. Part of that is movement. Most people moved a little, but I saw some people still stay sitting. So we're going to do two things. We're going to have everyone stand up. We're going to feel goofy in front of each other. That's okay. Stand up real quick. Arms out straight. Just reach up as tall as you can. Oh, your back crack a little.
I can't get any taller.
That's great. All right, perfect. And before you sit down, we're going to do one more thing. I'm going to teach you a quick breathing technique. Some of you may already know this. This was actually first discovered watching people sleep. I think it was in like the 1900-ish. It's been around for a long time. It's called the physiological sigh. And our bodies naturally do this when we're sort of asleep and we're maybe feeling a little stressed because maybe we're not getting quite enough oxygen. We're going to talk a little bit about that tomorrow. But our bodies actually know to do this on our own. But when we're awake, interestingly, we never figure out to do this. So this is how it works. Our lungs are not just two big balloons of oxygen. We think of them that way sometimes. But actually, there's thousands and thousands, millions, I don't know, lots and lots of tiny, 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 tiny little balloons called alveoli that make up each of our big sacs of lungs. Those little tiny things are where we do all of our oxygen absorption and where we give off CO2. CO2 is something that naturally builds up from our just sort of daily or our ongoing process of just our cellular turnover, living, breathing, basically. And as that CO2 builds up, we need to get rid of it. So this process allows us to sort of fill our lungs, and then as we start to slow down breathing, these little alveoli close down. That's when we're about to breathe out, and we would normally give off the most CO2. So we do a little extra sigh right at the end, and it puffs our little alveoli back up, and then as we breathe out, we're getting off more CO2 than we would with just a standard breath. Again, cool thing, our bodies can kind of do this on our own at night, but if we do it during the day, even a single one of these breaths has been measured, and it actually reduces some stress, can reduce cortisol response, can reduce feelings of anxiety. Certainly if you do a couple of these, it's great. I do this all the time when I have a stressful patient in the chair or a stressful conversation at home, and once you learn it, for me, Shelly will be like, you're deep breathing again, aren't you? I'm like, yes, I am. So it's helpful. So it looks a little bit like this. A nice, slow, deep breath in, preferably through your nose if you can, because breathing should be in the nose. Mouth is for eating, nose is for breathing. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. Preferably in your nose, deep breath in. Right at the end, a quick pop, one more breath, and then a nice, slow exhale. So that one more time, a nice deep breath in. And that is the physiological sigh. All right, guys, we'll give it back to Emily.
That's great. I love it. Which really is a good intro into stress management as well. So thank you for that. So your next set of handouts on the right there is the outline we're going to go over for stress management. We'll talk about deep breathing in there as well. So how important do you think stress management is on our health? Huge, right? And I think that often this is downplayed. We hear diet, exercise, which is super important, but we just don't think about. Another question I have in our society, how stressed are we? Yeah. I feel like when you ask someone how you're doing, it's always the same. I'm just so busy. I'm just so stressed. I'm just so busy. I'm so stressed. And I'm not putting down on that. I think we all feel that way, right? So defining stress, World Health Organization, a state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. It is a natural human response that prompts us to act. And I want to say with that, if we had no stress, we would not be productive, right? So some stress is good. It gets us up in the morning, gives us a to-do list, gives us things to do. And every single person experiences stress to some degree. We're not going to escape stress in this world. We're just not. So, therefore, the way we respond to stress is what's most important. So, this is a video here just talking about, and it's only 1 minute, but the stress response on the body.
The stress response. In stressful situations, the body switches on its autonomic nervous system and neurobiological processes in an attempt to maintain homeostasis. The body is prepared for its reaction to stress. In the brain, the hypothalamus is connected to the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus, stimulated by the sympathetic nervous system, releases the hormone corticotrophin-releasing factor, CRF. The CRF activates the pituitary gland to release the adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. This in turn alerts the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are located on top of each kidney. The ACTH from the pituitary gland stimulates the adrenal cortex to release cortisol. At the same time, neurons in the hypothalamus signal the medulla to release epinephrine, adrenaline, and norepinephrine, noradrenaline. These hormones then push the body into hyperalertness.
So if you're in hyperalertness, what would that be good for? What's it? Running from a bear. What else? Maybe running in a race. I don't know how many of you have run a race, but there is nothing like the adrenaline pumping when you're at that starting line. You're like, I could run for like 20 miles. This is great. You can't really, but it feels like it. Your adrenaline is just pumping. And so that stress response in a certain situation saves us, helps us, motivates us, but the chronic, right? So all throughout the day, our cortisol is going up and down, up and down. But when the cortisol stays, that's when it's damaging to our body. So short term, like we said, okay. Long term, we're going to talk about the effects of having cortisol. Long term, high blood pressure, plaques in the artery, lower immune system. This is why when you're stressed, guess what happens? You get sick. There's a correlation here, right? And so when we have these high cortisol for long term, obviously anxiety, depression, weakened immune system, but it actually affects also our heart long term, increased risk for heart disease, high blood pressure, blood sugar, digestive problems. That's why when you're stressed, you feel sick to your stomach, you get diarrhea, whatever it might be. Nerve problems. The stress creates a lot of nerve problems. So it wreaks havoc on our system. The good news is we can bring it down. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So physical, sickness, disease, mental, depression, anxiety gives us symptoms of I just feel fatigued, tired all the time. I just have headaches. I'm tense. Behaviors, when we have a lot of stress, sometimes we turn to substances to relieve that stress. We may lose our temper, right? That's the big go-to. We're yelling all of a sudden. Where did this come from? Man, I must be stressed. We're not eating as well. We might be indulging. It's called stress eating. I gotta have ice cream. I'm just so stressed, right? So lots of behaviors come from our stress. Now, what's very interesting, do you think that we all have the same level of stress tolerance? No. How many of you have ever seen someone, like these people amaze me, you're just like, how does that person do all that? Like, they must be so stressed. They do this, and they're taking it in stride, or maybe they're having a lot of trauma and they're taking it in stride. Like, whatever it might be, this person has a high stress tolerance. And then we're not going to name names on the other spectrum, but you see someone over here, you're like, I don't understand why they're stressed. They literally do almost nothing. No offense to anyone, but I'm just saying, it feels like I don't know why you're stressed. It's like there's hardly, okay. The point is, there's a spectrum with how much stress we can each handle. So one, let's not judge people, right? if they can't handle much. But two, can we change our stress tolerance, our stress resilience? What do you think? We can. So our stress tolerance is built, so it's one's ability to handle stress without becoming too overwhelmed or allowing it to negatively impact you. Determined by our personality. Obviously, more upbeat, positive people are going to handle it better. Our genetics, life experiences. Sometimes the most resilient people you meet have been through a ton of trauma, right? And you're like, oh, well, that's why they've worked through so much. People with good coping skills and also social support really helps us with that. So you can take these short tests to see what your stress resilience is. So they're online, but here's a short one, brief resilience scale, to look at how good you are with stress resilience. And I think it's just thinking logically, how quickly do you bounce back? How quickly do you work through things? Honestly, the best way to figure it out, ask your closest friend. Maybe ask your spouse or best friend, how am I at managing stress? And they'll tell you because they know. Okay, so now if we determine maybe I'm not very good at managing stress, how can I improve it? The first step for improving our stress management is building our self-awareness. And we'll break that down, what that means. Because if I'm not aware of myself, my body, my behaviors, how can I regulate? There's no regulation happening. I am simply living reactively. That's all I'm doing. I'm not living proactively. So if someone comes into my office, a client, and maybe one of their treatment goals is learning to cope with stress better. So one of the things we might look at every time they come in is, okay, let's rate your stress today on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, where are you on the stress meter? How are you feeling? Where's your stress today? Then we're going to look at, how does stress affect you in your body? What does that feel like to you when you're really stressed? So, and it's going to be different for everyone. It may be, I hear some people, I just hold this stress in my neck. Other people, I just get headaches. Other people, I feel sick to my stomach. I can feel my heart kind of speeding up or the heart palpitations. It can be a lot of different things. But I'm going to want you as a client to get to know yourself well enough to know that you can recognize based on your body and your behaviors, how you're acting when you are starting to get stressed. That's very important. Can someone else regulate your stress? No. Who's responsible for your own self-regulation of stress? You. That's it. You can't expect your spouse or friend to be like, okay, we need to regulate now, you have to do that. So then we're going to write on a scale of 1 to 10 in order, how does your body feel when it's getting increasingly stressed? So either the bodily symptoms, well, first my heart races, then I get a little short of breath, I can't think straight, I'm sick to my stomach, then I'm hot, and then I'm lightheaded, and then, Or we might look at the order of your behaviors. Well, when I start to get a little stressed, I notice I start talking really fast. Or I start pacing, right? Or when I'm super stressed, I'm yelling at this point, right? So let me ask you, why do you think it's important to have a rating scale here? What's the point of this? Exactly, early on. Because if all I know when I'm stressed is, I know I'm stressed once I'm yelling at everyone. That's about when I realize, I'm stressed. How hard is it to come down from that? It's very hard once you've lost your cool. Right? That's really hard to regulate. But if I can regulate it in the beginning, oh, it's starting to happen. My heart's racing. I'm feeling okay. So that's when you need to intervene. So then the next aspect of self-awareness is, okay, when you're feeling that way, what in your environment is triggering your stress? So different things trigger different people. are more stressful for different people. And I find this very interesting depending on your personality. For one person, it might be loud noise, crowded places. For someone else, it might be feeling rushed. I can't stand when I feel rushed. It is stressful for me. Packing for a trip, this is a big one for me. And I've told my husband, like, the day before our trip, you just have to know my stress is through the roof. Like, something about that, the organization it requires, I think I'm gonna forget something. My mind is reeling. Like, my stress is just through the roof. So I know that about myself. Rowdy children, maybe they're running around like crazy, acting crazy. Maybe you're a teacher. Maybe as a parent. Mess can be very stressful for people, especially very neat people. You know, I'm not as neat, but I mean, mess still bothers me, but I know when you're a super neat person, it can literally be jarring to your system when there's just a few things out of place, right? That's not me, but I know people like that. Being around sick people can be very stressful, right? For people that are really worried about getting sick. So it can be any number of things. Okay, so then the question is, now we get into the self-regulation. Okay, now you know what it feels like in your body, your behaviors you're observing, your triggers, as you're going throughout your day. Okay, I'm getting a little stressed right now. So what do? I would say in that moment, if at all possible, take a time out from whatever's causing the stress. Maybe you're at a concert, a basketball game, and it's just so noisy and crowded, and, take a time out. Maybe you're in your home, maybe you're in someone else's home, take a time out. When I say time out, it can be very simple. Just walk out the door and stand on the porch for 5 minutes, right? Take some deep breath. It doesn't have to be extravagant, but you have to be aware of when you're getting stressed. Now, when you're taking your time out, you're doing things during that time out to bring it down. You're practicing relaxation techniques in your stress toolbox, which we'll talk about. So when you're taking a time out, you want to go right away. As soon as you're feeling, I feel like I'm getting stressed, I need to go right now. You need to, we said it can be just 5 minutes. Also, I would say ahead of time, know your calming spot. For me, it's my bedroom, but for you, it may not be. But where is your spot? So if the trigger is noise, where is it quiet? If the trigger is mess, where is it neat? If the trigger is, whatever it might be, crowded, where is there solitude? So what is your calm spot? And if you can, go there. Also, it does not have to be verbalized, although I will say there is great benefit sometimes in telling the people around you, I'm stressed, I need a minute. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, and it actually gives them insight into why you might be acting the way you're acting, right? And then you return to the stressful environment once you've cooled down. So when we're doing our relaxation strategies, we're doing deep breathing. You might be doing the tapping, which helps to connect the left and right brain. You might be doing massage. You might be doing progressive muscle relaxation. So progressive muscle relaxation is basically you're tensing and relaxing all the different muscle groups in your body. It's basically like giving yourself a massage when you don't have a personal massage therapist. So you start down in your feet, you tense and hold 3 to 5 seconds, and you release. And your release is very slow. Actually, that takes even longer, like 8 to 10 seconds, release. You go up to your legs, you do that, go all the way up your body so that your last one would probably be your hands, tense, hold, slowly release. And what it does is it just calms the nervous system, calms the nerves down. And you can do that anywhere to calm yourself. And then the other thing I would say, when you can, go outside. I think that the Lord made us to be in nature. Nature is incredibly soothing, and that's the way He created it to be for us. And part of the reason it's soothing, because it's a natural environment, away from all the distraction and everything, it's calming, but it also engages our 5 senses, not taste, 4 senses. And so when you're outside, you want to be thinking, what am I looking at? What am I hearing? What am I smelling? What do I feel? The wind. And this is helping to calm you, right, from all of the craziness going on in your brain and calming your mind. So with deep breathing, you're going, well, they have their hands on their chest. I actually like to do it on the belly better because you want your diaphragm to go in and out. You don't want your chest to be up and down. That's shallow breathing. So you want diaphragm in and out. And box breathing, so we'll do this together. So it's going to go in through your nose, out through your mouth. You're going to put your hands here. You can even close your eyes if you want. So you're going to breathe in through your nose for 4 count, hold for 4 count, and then let out for 4 counts. So here we go. We're going to breathe in, hold, slowly breathe out. And you should feel the expansion of your diaphragm, right? So let's do one more. Going to breathe in through your nose, hold, slowly let out. Now, that seems simple, but that's probably the quickest, best, most effective thing you can do to quickly calm yourself when you are anxious and stressed, is deep breathing. My son even asked me that the other day, Mom, what can I do when I'm anxious or whatever? And I said, deep breathing, just take some deep breaths. So even a child can learn this as a way to cope with stress and anxiety. It's very effective. I see with kids, people will say, smell the flowers and breathe out, whatever works for the child. Okay, your stress toolbox. So you guys have in your handouts here, if you want to go ahead and take that out, I wrote down, I think it's about 30, possible things you can do when you're stressed. So I want this to be very personal for you. So if you don't see something on here that works for you, add it at the bottom. Some of the ones might be journaling. And now when we talk about journaling, I always have to clarify this for people. Journaling, when it's really effective, is not just journaling the facts. It's journaling your emotions. So for me, I like to write a letter to God. If I'm really stressed, dear Lord, I'm really struggling, I'm really sad about this, I'm really hurting. I'm writing my emotions to the Lord out on paper, or obviously you just say it, but it helps me actually to write it. Read Psalms or other calming scripture, go for a walk or run, call a friend, listen to calming music. So let's take a few seconds, look at this list, circle 4 or 5 of these that you feel like, that would be really calming for me if I was stressed. Okay, does somebody want to share one thing that you like to do when you're stressed that really helps you? Maybe it's really random. Maybe it's silly. Yeah, Eric.
I read that seeing a bird can calm you for like up to 40 minutes an hour or something.
Wow.
Sometimes when I'm stressed, I know my neighbor has a bird feeder. So
Wow.
I'll look over and there's always birds. And I think, yeah, thank you, Lord.
Wow. I did not know that. It goes with the whole nature, like.
Consider the birds.
Oh, yeah, consider the birds. That is so cool.
There has been actual studies.
Wow.
Hearing a bird can
Wow. That's amazing. And I bet water is the same. I know for me, if I'm around water, like the ocean waves or a lake or a river, that my mind just, yeah. Who said that? I heard it, but I didn't. Okay, Claire, yes, go for a hike, yeah. That can be calming for a lot of people, yeah. Exercise, yeah. Yeah, which you don't think of that as calming, but it is, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because we're all dehydrated all the time. I think that's huge. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully you're going to get to know, as part of your self-awareness, what your go-to things are. my son is so funny. So we have Alexa, which is a blessing and a curse, but anyways. But I love Fernando Ortega. I don't know, that music just calms my soul. If you don't know him, I just love that singer. And so my son, Levi, will go, if I'm stressed, he'll go, Mom, do you want me to play Fernando Ortega? And I'm just like, oh my goodness. So then he'll say, Alexa, play Fernando Ortega. Anyways. So yeah, but I think knowing, like, okay, if it's listening to music, who is your calming artist that calms you? What is that calming song? What is that for you? What is your toolbox? Okay, so when I have a client, we're talking about building that awareness around stress. We also so we talked about environmental stress as you go throughout the day, because we all have that. But there's also life stress, right? So we try to identify what is that right now, what's going on, what are those stressors. So by doing that, we're looking at what is your current mental state. And if I see someone has been more depressed, more anxious, maybe you're more stressed right now. Maybe there's more life stress going on. We're going to look at current functioning, because if someone isn't able to focus as well at work, at home, at school, maybe there's more stress going on. I've had a client recently who, he came in, and I would say a lot of times for men, it seems to be their work, I will say. Like, if I feel like they're really depressed, and a lot of times it's like we end up always going to the work topic, and then it's like, well, I hate my job. It's, okay, well, that might, So I think a lot of times, I'm not trying to be too gender specific, but I do think a lot of times it can be work. So I think looking at life stress is really important to identify how stressed someone is. You can also take stress tests online. This one is online to see how currently stressed you are. And also it can help to compare your current stress to other seasons of your life, right? So what are times in your life when you remember being really stressed? How does that compare to how you're feeling right now at this stage of life? So some stressful seasons of life for people is typically with any big changes. Job changes, moving, retirement can be very stressful, especially for men, but also periods of, I would say, decision making are very stressful for people. So this sense of like, I just can't make a decision. Maybe it's about career, maybe it's about, who you date. That's very stressful for people. Busyness, a death, or caretaking is a very stressful season of life. And I might even have you make a timeline of looking throughout your life. I want you to put down the different points when you were at high stress. And then we're going to try to see, are there any patterns? Oh yeah, every single time I was really stressed was like the year after a big move, or the 6 months after a job change. Okay, so this is a pattern of what is stressful for me. Another thing that can be helpful is we talk about the impact of stress on the body. So I put this in your handouts, the Holmes, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Ray, but I think life stress inventory. So here, they assign a point value system for each of the life events that have happened to you during the last year. You total the points, and then at the bottom, it tells you your likelihood of having a stress-induced health problem, right, in the next, I think, 2 years. So this is for huge stress, right, going on. And we know that huge stress really impacts our health. Grief is huge on, our stress and our functioning and all that, and divorce, all these things. And so then you total that. So this is when there's a lot of major stress going on. But I will say for the majority of people, it's more those typical life stressors. So then I'm going to have you rate. I might draw a picture, like a stick figure of you, and then around it, some bubbles, some circles. And then I'm going to say, okay, now I want you to fill in these bubbles with 3, 4, 5 things that are stressing you the most right now. Like, I need you to prioritize what is the most stressful right now. Well, my job, my marriage, my kids, this friendship that's on the rocks, whatever it might be. Then we're going to go a step deeper. Why is this situation causing you so much stress? Because like I said, what causes stress for one person is not that stressful for another. So one example for me that's very stressful, when I have to have a conflict with someone in a way that it's someone I'm close to, and I know what I'm about to say to them, they're not going to like. They're not going to want to hear. That just tears me up inside for days, for weeks, and I'm just, oh, this is so stressful. My husband loves conflict. Doesn't stress him in the least. He's like, why are you stressed about that? Who cares? So for me, like, quitting a job is like the worst stress. For him, he's like, oh, who cares? You know. So like, different stress for different people. What stresses you and why? And then brainstorm ways to reduce stress in those areas. Another aspect of stress is the internal dialogue going on related to those stressors. I can very much, well, let me ask you, well, I kind of already told you, but do you make stress worse for yourself by things you're telling yourself? Yes, we do all the time. So whether that's worrying about something, whether it's condemning yourself, oh, I'm such an idiot, I should have known that, or unrealistic expectations, I really thought this would go better than this, or I thought my spouse would act this way. Putting pressure on yourself that doesn't need to be there to be perfect, to keep certain deadlines, maybe lacking confidence adds a lot of stress in your life, actually, because you're not confident in your decisions, in the things you're doing. So then we're going to deal with that with cognitive behavioral therapy. So we're going to look at what is the thought that might be irrational or negative that you're beating yourself over about, or you're jumping to a conclusion about, or whatever it might be, personalizing, and then how can we change that to a more rational, positive thought process? So an example of this in a stressful situation could be your go-to is personalization, which is, this is my fault. I always mess things up. I'm just so terrible, right? Versus, you know what? This just happened by chance, and I'm very capable of figuring out a solution here, right? How different do you feel based on if you're telling yourself, it's all my fault, right? How do you feel from that? What do you think? What's an emotion word that you might be feeling? Yeah. Discouraging, shame, right? Embarrassment, depression, versus if I empower myself, I can figure this out. Confident, peaceful, whatever it might be. Okay, so the external stressors that we talked about could be your job, your schoolwork, your housework, your finances, your partner, your children, whatever it might be. And like I said, we're going to kind of rate what is the most pressing, and we're going to start with that as number one. Then we're going to look at what is your level of control over the thing you're stressed about. So I'm really stressed about my job. I'm just really stressed about. Okay, let's talk about what is stressing you about your job. So I had this one client who the job that was so stressful for him, the reason we realized it was so stressful was the customer service. It was extremely like listening to customer complaints all day long, right? And that for his personality was very stressful, right? And so what is his control over it in that situation? We actually determined he'd been there long enough, he could actually ask his boss to be moved out of customer service into more management, basically. And that's what ended up happening. But anyways, you determine what you can control, you control what you can, and you leave the rest to God, and you let it go. So the Serenity Prayer is very effective for this. I know that's many times used in addiction recovery, but it also is really good for this principle. So God, grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And if you master this, you've mastered life. So you have a handout here, and it just says control activity if you want to take that out. So what is your stressor? So in this example on your sheet, I have the work is what's stressful. Okay, so then we do 3 columns. One column is no control, some control, all control. How much control, what is something in your work that you have all control over? Okay, well, I can do a good job. I can work hard. I have control of that. Some control might be if I get a promotion or not. I have some control because I can work really hard, but not all control. No control if my boss likes me, right? I can't control that. So if you're coming into the office or talking to your friend and all you're talking about is, my boss doesn't like me. He just hates me. It's very stressful for me. Would it be helpful for you to keep focusing on that? No, you can't control if someone likes you or not. Is everyone going to like you, first of all? No. People don't like me. People don't like, there's always people. So you've got to get comfortable with someone may not like you. Okay. So we look at what you have control over, and then we focus in counseling of the column that you have all control over. We do what we can for the some control column, and we let go of what we can't control. And honestly, this takes a lot of prayer and surrender. Lord, it really bothers me that my boss doesn't like me. Just help me to be secure in your love for me and my identity in you. Help me to not care so much. Help me to be able to let that go, right? And so I think this can apply to any situation, any stressor, and just putting our focus on our own ability, our own behaviors, essentially. So any questions about the control activity? Because I want you to be able to take that home and put your stressors down on there and be able to do that. So in a relationship, what do you have control over? Do you have control over someone else's behaviors or someone else's feelings? No. In a relationship, you have control over your behaviors, your feelings, the way you respond. Okay, another big reason that I see people are stressed is because I'm sorry to come back to boundaries, but they lack boundaries in their life in either one or multiple areas. So an example would be very poor time management. Would that add to your stress to have poor time management? Yeah, because you're constantly feeling behind. I'm late to everything. I can't catch up. We all feel behind to a certain extent, but I'm talking about you can't keep to a schedule. You can't get anything done. And so then this person, which I had someone in counseling where we worked simply on a schedule, managing her time, and then setting boundaries when other people would try to interrupt that time so that she could feel like she was getting something done throughout the day. Setting boundaries in your emotions, because if I just get depressed every time my friend calls me talking about a relationship, or then I can't function, then I'm stressed, right? So having boundaries on your emotions, boundaries on your money, your energy, because if I'm giving like an example of that, sometimes people give everything, every ounce of energy to their job, and then they come home and they've got nothing left. So then we have to learn, you've got to set boundaries at work. You can't kill yourself at this job. You've got to have enough left for your loved ones at home, right? And so setting boundaries on that, to be respected, to share opinions. So a boundary on job might be telling your boss that you're not going back to an old job where you were stressed. Boundary in school, sticking to a certain amount of study time each week and just saying, I think if I study for this class this number of hours, I've got to just be good with that and stick to that and be proud of myself for that. Time, emotions, respect. So kind of in summary here, I would say some of the most helpful skills for stress management that I see. Coping skills. So when you're stressed, being self-aware enough to take a time out, to do your relaxation strategies, to do your stress toolbox, having those go-to things. That is going to be a helpful skill for stress management. Time management. So people that have good stress management can manage their time. They can prioritize what's most important to them. I know that for me, my relationships are most important, so that is what I prioritize, or my health, or whatever it might be. Following a schedule, having realistic expectations, and letting go of what you can't accomplish in a certain day. All of those are going to help your stress level because you're managing your time well. Decision-making skills. Some people are so stressed. I have a friend like this, and for 20 years of knowing her, she's always stressed because she can't make a decision. Or she makes a decision and second guesses it constantly, right? And so I think there's something to be said for good decision-making skills. So being able to weigh the pros and cons, brainstorm alternatives, base your decisions on your values, knowing your values, and then having confidence in the decision and not looking back is just as much a part of that. Healthy relationship skills, because are relationships stressful? Yes. So the better we can be at managing and having healthy relationships, the less stress we're going to be. So those communication skills, conflict resolution skills, setting boundaries, all of that is going to bring our stress down as we go throughout the day. So that's kind of the gist of stress management, or what I have gathered. Any questions on anything that we covered related to stress? Hopefully you're feeling less stressed after talking about stress. I don't know. So I think that's all I can think of. So thank you guys for listening, and just come talk to me if you have private questions or whatever. So thank you. Do you want to say anything? Or
real quick, so just so everyone knows, we'll